Um, I'm really delighted that you could join us this morning, James. I've gotten to know you through, I think, many of your articles in Forbes, but I just found out now that you're a biochemist, a geologist with a PhD in geochemistry from Caltech, but you're also therefore an established scientist in earth and environmental sciences, specializing in geologic disposal of nuclear waste, energy-related research, planetary surface processes, radiobiology, and shielding for space colonies. So that's quite a breadth, as well as subsurface transport and environmental cleanup of heavy metals. That you write, as I've seen many of your writings about nuclear, the environment, and energy for Forbes. And there's a website called forbes.com/sites/James Conca. Also, you are on our website, Rethinking Nuclear. And if you go into the section on my website about energy and science and dealing with the issue of so-called waste, which are really spent nuclear fuel, you'll find a couple of links to your articles there. So I welcome you with great enthusiasm, James, and you have the floor. It looks like a really interesting talk that you prepared.
Oh, good. Thank you. Now, can you, I'm just curious, can you see the whole screen or are pictures of us impinging on it?
Just two of us on the side, but we can shrink that if you like to hide self-view, which I'll do. That
yeah, actually, how's that even better?
If you're on a laptop, you can also use your mouse to hover on the right-hand side, and there's a little I don't even know the name of it, a little button that appears in the middle, and you can pull it over.
Right, right.
So everybody can kind of adjust their own view.
Okay, so everyone does their own. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. I really appreciate this. This is a great group, and I'm actually going to talk about Green New Deal and what that means, and put forth a scientifically achievable one, which is not the path we're on right now, but one we better be on in the next 20 years, or we're going to be in trouble. Let me see. So I love these NASA nighttime shots, not just because I work for NASA, but you can see right away who has energy and who doesn't. What's the fighting's been all about, and what it always will be about. And right now, our species produces about 27 trillion kilowatt hours a year. That is continuously changing. And we're going to go to at least 40, or talk about at least 35, but about 40 plus by 2050. And we'll talk about why that's the case. Unfortunately, when people talk about decarbonization and talk about Green New Deal, they're kind of stuck in the present number. And they think in 20 years, if you replace 27 trillion kilowatt hours a year with non-fossil fuel, that you're going to solve everything. It's like, no, we got to go up to 40. So, and that's huge. So the problem is the use is growing much faster than the alternatives are growing. So our carbon emissions are still growing as a planet. And even though you can point to Washington State or some other places that are doing well in terms of CO2 emissions, the world is not. And so, of course, this is an issue that involves the world. Now, there are local issues that are great. I mean, if you get rid of coal, separate from the CO2 emissions is, the pollution, the coal waste itself, which is not dealt with very well at all. So, there are other reasons to get rid of fossil fuel that have nothing to do with climate change, and that's okay. And so locally, it's still good to get rid of things like coal, even though the world is growing. Anyway, so here is now. You just said Wisconsin was only 9%. I apologize for this. So
it was higher, but we shut down a Kewanee plant, and that cut us back. We have in our audience somebody who worked for 30 years at our remaining Point Beach plant, and we were hoping to get a plant near La Crosse, but that'll be a few years away. That'll be one of the NuScale plants.
Nice. All right,
So-
well, I apologize. This is lower, and I imagine as a result of that, gas is higher.
Yes, that's right.
That's always the case. When you close a nuclear plant, it's always replaced by natural gas, never by anything else. So anyway, so the world, let's get back to the left here. The world is about 2/3 fossil fuel, and the other third split almost evenly between hydro and nuclear. It's been that way for the last 40 years. It will be that way for the next 40 unless we make more radical changes. I won't be talking about transportation much, but it is, of course, completely dominated by petroleum, oil and diesel, and jet fuel and things like that. Bio hasn't really made much of a dent. But I'm going to stick mainly with power. That's sort of the low-hanging fruit. The United States is also 2/3 fossil fuel, although it's changed. The gas and coal numbers were almost reversed 20 years ago. We have been closing coal plants quite a bit. We have, in fact, closed half of the coal plants in America compared to 1990. So we've done a good job of that. Okay. But we're not really replacing it with what we need to be replacing it with. So we're about 20% nuclear, 7% hydro, and the rest is split with other. Again, Wisconsin is split, reasonably evenly. West Virginia is the highest coal, highest fossil fuel production, and Illinois is the highest nuclear. The European Union is a little bit more nuclear because of France, a little bit less hydro than us. Korea is still mainly coal, although their nuclear is climbing, just like Japan before Fukushima, and they'll get back to it, hopefully. Korea and Japan, they were planning on being 60% nuclear by mid-century. And that's because they have no resources. They have no coal, they have no gas, they have no oil, they have, their renewable resources are pretty poor, and their bioresources, they can't even feed themselves. So unless you want to be completely dependent on countries like China and the United States and Russia, then you go nuclear. And so that was what they were doing, and Korea is still going to be doing that. And hopefully Japan will as well. Now, China is still mainly coal with a significant amount of hydro. Nuclear doesn't look like much, but that is growing precipitously. They are pretty much breaking ground on a new nuclear plant every month, and they're bringing online a nuclear plant almost every month. So their last 5-year plan, and I don't know if you know China's 5-year plans, they actually stick to them. We don't have a plan at all, but they actually stick to their 5-year plans. Of course, it's authoritarian government, so it's easy to do that. But their last 5-year plan said they were going to have 180 nukes by 2035. Now that's huge. I mean, we only have 99 still. At our height, we had about 104. Yeah, that's incredible. And they're online to do that. So, and those are big nukes. They're also building small ones. They just recently built 2 pebble bed reactors. So here we are talking about, these, modern reactors, advanced designs and small modular reactors, and how we're going to do this by 2030 or 2035. They're doing it. They just hooked them up they hooked up a fast reactor and 2 pebble bed reactors to the grid, and they're working great. So
they also have a small modular reactor that's floating in the Arctic.
Yes, yeah.
So they're ahead of us there. People say there are no SMRs around, but in fact there are.
Yeah. No, in fact, the funny thing, our nuclear navy is like the unsung heroes of nuclear, because they're small modular reactors. I mean, every aircraft carrier has 2 of them, and every sub has 1. And so, and in fact, when you talk about fast reactors, alternative designs, the Russian attack subs, the Wolf class subs, were all fast reactor on the submarines, which is really weird. So again, this is nothing really new. I mean, the designs are better than they were, but we tried everything in the past.
Quick question. Is it possible for the civilian nuclear establishment and industry to talk to the military and harvest information and experience from them? I don't get the impression that there's any crosstalk.
Oh, there is. There is. Of course, the nuke navy is a little bit secret. You can't, give away certain things. But the reason this, in fact, now aircraft carriers and nuclear subs, they never have to refuel. You know that? Never have to refuel.
No, didn't know that.
Yeah, because
Well,
they use highly enriched uranium. I mean, bomb grade uranium.
like 90%.
Right, right. And so at that point, you never have to refuel for 40, 50 years. So that's why a lot of the new designs, like not NuScale, but
BMX, so
X Energy, right? X Energy, and even Bill Gates's fast reactor.
Sure.
They're looking to use high assay, low enriched, so it's only 20%, just
20%,
under 20%. But that gives you 4 or 5 times as much power and length of time per fuel, and you don't have to refuel as often. So we're finally getting away from this nonsense that higher enrichment means proliferation, and it doesn't. As all of you know, we may talk about this. You can't make a nuclear weapon out of spent nuclear fuel from a reactor. I mean, you need a weapons reactor. So that's why we built weapons reactors. Now, the funny thing is that Chernobyl was a weapons reactor. Most people don't understand that. It was designed to make a ton of plutonium, and that's one of the flaws, because it was graphite moderated. When you want to make weapons, you graphite moderate because the speed is more efficient. I mean, the moderation is more efficient for producing plutonium-239. So, and you can't keep the fuel in the reactor more than 6 months, or else you start breathing in nuclear poisons, or fission poisons, like plutonium-240 and 242. So you cannot make a weapon from spent nuclear fuel, and that has dominated the fear of civilian nuclear programs around the world. Is that you'll have proliferation? It's like, no, and even terrorists know you don't use a commercial reactor.
Is there no way to educate the politicians of this fallacy?
Yeah. See, the problem is most of the proliferation people are not scientists. They're not nuclear engineers. They're diplomats and political science people and other things. They're not nuclear scientists.
The story I heard is that Jack Kennedy was the last American president who had a really serious clue about nuclear energy.
Yeah, no, yep, absolutely. And of course, Eisenhower was brilliant about it.
Yeah, he was pretty right.
Yeah, so even Obama loved it, because he's from Illinois. He knew it, like he just wasn't allowed to talk about it, which is, kind of absurd.
Yeah.
So, and I just get tired.
Depressing topic. Let's move on.
Yeah, I love it. So anyway, so China isn't much now, but they will dominate nuclear in the near future. I mean, that 10, 15 years, and they're going to be it. So it's good and bad. Let's see.
We have a little question coming in here from Lou. Can I ask you for
Yeah.
He asks, do fast reactors in submarines have enough shielding to protect crew members?
Yes, there's never been a problem there. The problem with Soviets being, besides being idiots, they actually had a polonium leak in some of their fast reactors. So they were not good at dealing with that, and that caused some problems. But we've never had any problem with it. Now the thing about the fast reactors, that their subs were faster than ours because of that, but they weren't. They were noisy. so we were a little slower, but we're quiet, and so it actually worked out. Ours are better.
Lee asks a question. Don't forget Jimmy Carter. Wasn't he in the nuclear Navy group?
Yes, he was, and he also was one of the responders, the lead of the responders to the first real accident, a nuclear accident in Canada in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So people kind of forget about that.
Yeah. That got him a little bit negative.
Yeah. We all were hoping he was going to be pro nuclear, but he really wasn't.
Tony Praza has his hand up. Tony, can you speak?
Yes, actually, I did have a hand up earlier, and then, but let me ask the question. On the very first slide, the increase from 27 to 40, I can't remember the basis that was on, requirements for electricity around the world. That seems underestimated to me. As we move towards EVs with batteries and charging them, and we moved, and they're not all going to be charged at night, as some people think.
Right.
And the next element associated with that is heat pumps and other ways. Yeah, we're going to gain efficiencies, but
Right.
the whole world is going towards air conditioning. Right?
Yeah, no, this is one of the problems. So you could build in some, efficiency and conservation and that kind of thing, and that's great. I mean, this is just a guess. I mean, it's 40 trillion plus or minus, well, probably plus, 5. I mean, hell, it could, if we're really stupid, we could go to 50. But
Yes.
then cost and materials. I'll talk about this a little bit, but materials are the real problem. In fact, it's the huge report out by this Australian geochemist, geometallurgist, really brilliant. He basically looks at all the materials we need just to do business as usual or to decarbonize. And the real issue is copper. That's it, not lithium. I mean, the others are a problem, lithium, cobalt, stuff like that. It's a problem, but it's copper. We do not have enough copper in the earth to decarbonize, period. We barely have enough to do business as usual. So climbing to 40 trillion kilowatt hours is going to put a strain on that. And that gets to seabed mining, which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Which is what we need to do. We need to seabed mine. It's much more benign environmentally than land mining. My God, and you don't use child labor in the Congo. So there's a whole bunch of issues, and like I was mentioning, the science is not the issue. I mean, it's things like how the grid works, material science, politics, all sorts of things that are more important and that are the real hurdles. And it's not the science. Science is easy.
We have this guy out in California, the map to nowhere, where he's from Stanford, where he thinks we can.
Oh God, not Jacobson. Oh
yeah. This guy, people still listen to this man. It amazes me.
Yeah. No. I mean, even though the scientific community has totally debunked him, the issue is he's writing what the politicians want to hear.
Yeah.
Well, certain ones. And so the state legislatures always use his stuff, and it's like, it's wrong. It's not just, since it's wrong, it is blatantly wrong, and he knows it. Of course, he's his funding comes from.
We had some people here in the Midwest try and correct him, and he sued them for a little while.
Yes, no, I know that. Is that bizarre? I mean, it's like, wait a second, you just lost all credibility as a scientist. We don't sue each other when we don't agree.
Right.
And it was even nastier because he sued the one guy that did not have deep pockets, that did not have institution behind him, like Stanford. I mean, there were people from Stanford that were on this paper that really, attacked, just debunked him, and his own colleagues. But he didn't sue any of those because Harvard and stuff, they have big bucks to do it. This one guy, Clack, Robert Clack,
Yes,
he didn't.
I remember. Yeah.
He's just a consultant. So he tried to do that, which is really even nastier than just everyone. But the judge basically said, you better withdraw this or you're going to go down and have to pay everyone else's costs. So yeah, but he hates me because I always talk trash about him. But
good for you.
And also I wrote it up in Forbes. I wrote up basically the arguments from this group that countered him, that debunked him. And boy, he didn't like that. So there's actually a site called The Lies of Jim Conca, which is very funny. Which means it's kind of like, hey, I made it.
What was he lying about, guys? I didn't catch exactly what you were talking about.
Oh, this guy Jacobson, who says you can do everything with wind turbines and solar panels. Okay, but then he doesn't talk about the 600 hydro plants he needs, but he tucks that away in the back. And so he sued the people that were writing papers to debunk that. And of course, it was thrown out because it was stupid. And I wrote it up a couple of times in Forbes, and he didn't like that. So someone made up the site, The Lies of Jim Conca, just to counter me.
He's way off base. Sounds like he's way off base.
Oh, he's way off base. So and it's just these kind of people, the same thing with the physicians for social responsibility, which I call them the physicians for social irresponsibility.
Right.
They just make stuff up, and they take little teeny facts and put them throughout so that it sounds you can point to something that's true, and so it kind of gives it a sort of a legitimacy that it shouldn't have. And so one thing about it is, because I said, the judge threw it out. Well, the judge didn't actually throw it out. He told Jacobson to remove it, to not pursue this. So it's a little bit different, but it's the same thing. The judge threw it out. So they were like, oh, Conca doesn't even know what happened in the court. It's like, I don't really care about that. That's a detail that, is, who cares? But so that kind of stuff. But it was very, very funny. And yeah, you don't sue your colleagues in science if you disagree with them.
This is a stunning table that you have showing the difference between the world and the United States.
Yes, yeah. So this is the world power consumption growth curve. It's very steep. It has nothing to do with us anymore. We were the last century. The world is, I didn't fix this. Sorry, it's 27 now. So the world's 27, and the idea is how much are we going to keep going ad infinitum? We're going to turn over at some point that we could, or maybe not. And what's that going to take? So the idea that we're going to replace fossil fuel, which is 2/3 of the present total, and then reach things like 35 or 40 trillion without fossil fuel is rather incredible, because it means you're going to have to come up with at least 20 trillion kilowatt hours of non-fossil fuel, which is more than all fossil fuel today. So it's not just replacing all fossil fuel, but coming up with twice that amount at least. And those numbers are stunning. And the numbers matter. I mean, the only reason I put this up there is that, these are big numbers and they matter. Now, there's a little slop in them. We talk plus or minus 5 trillion, but that's plus or minus 5 trillion, which is the entire US use. I mean, that is not a trivial number. And none of these are. So, keep that in mind. Where should we go? And the reason this curve is steep is because of these people. Okay, so over 1 billion people still have no access to electricity. 80% of them are in South Asia, sub-Saharan. So here we see these here. 2.4 billion people still burn wood manure as their main source of energy, and 3 billion more people will be born by 2040. Now, or 2050. We just passed 8 billion, right, which is stunning, a little faster than we thought. And the population growth is a little faster than we thought, and we'll top, 10 billion easily. And you might say, well, forget them. We have our energy. They shouldn't have energy. We care about the planet and all that. But that's kind of nasty, because it takes about 3,000 kilowatt hours per person per year to lift someone up out of poverty. And that's it. There's nothing. It doesn't matter whether you're a 17th century nobleman making the equivalent of 3,100 kilowatt hours off of 10 slaves, 10 indentured servants, 4 oxen, 4 horses. It's an interesting calculation for the student. But that nobleman was getting about 3,100 kilowatt hours a year off of all those people. They were getting nothing, of course, but he was having a pretty good life. So it takes about 3,000. Now, everyone here watching this gets about 12,000 off of a variety of sources. But that's rather incredible. So you can say, well, how do you do that? How do you lift people out of poverty? Because poverty is actually the worst environmental agent in the world. Poor humans, they just devastate the environment. And so you got to stop that. And it turns out the best birth control throughout history has been access to energy. That's why the aristocracy always died out, because they stopped having kids. All you have to do is have about 6,000 kilowatt hours per person per year, and you stop. The birth rate drops to below 2. It's happened in every single developed country. And the United States is a little funny, not to get funny is a weird word, but we actually our birth rate's slightly above 2. Well, the last time I checked was above 2, and supposedly it's better than Spain's, which is like 1.3, because we treat our single women better than most countries. Now, I don't think we treat them that well at all, but we treat them better than most countries, and so that's why the birth rate is still above 2. So that's, again, these weird things that have nothing to do with science, but are driving all of these issues. So if you're going to decarbonize, you're going to save the planet, whatever, but you also have to eradicate global poverty. That's all the COP meetings are about. All the climate change meetings are about how to give these people 3,000 kilowatt hours per year without giving them coal, and who's going to pay for it. Those are the only two questions that matter at COP. None of this other crap matters, okay? Who's going to pay for it, and how do we do this without giving them coal?
Do you hear me by any chance?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lou, go ahead.
Your previous slide, isn't the units, kilowatt hours is a unit of energy? Not this slide, the one before, the slide prior. That's a unit of energy. So are you talking power or energy?
Energy,
On that,
right.
energy.
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, that's why, power is interesting because then you talk about megawatts and kilowatts, but then you have to correct for capacity factor and lifespan and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is so much more accurate.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, and it's like, when a wind farm, says it's 200 megawatt wind farm, it's like, yeah, but how much is it actually producing? That's all you care about. You don't care about what the installed capacity is, or the nameplate capacity. If the wind blew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's irrelevant. So you really want to know what is it actually delivering, because that's what counts. Other than that, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the EIA often puts things out in power, and that's deceiving. When you start comparing renewables to other like new fission, and you're comparing power, that's totally not fair.
Right. So I will get into that since you all have given me a lot of time, which is great because I like to digress like this.
Good.
So anyway, so the whole idea, the only way to eradicate global poverty, and this is important because there's a dynamic, a conundrum between humans and nature. And this is the problem. What do you care about? Well, we're trying to care about nature here, but if you ask someone to sacrifice their children for the good of the planet, they're going to kick you out the door. I mean, this is absurd. So this is what evolution has been about for the last 4 billion years. The individual versus the group, right? Versus the species. So yeah, the individual has to be alive enough and well enough to survive, to keep the species going. But it's really all about the group, because if the group fails, or if the species fails, or the niche fails, then it doesn't matter how good the individual is. So there's this really weird dynamic. So you have got to deal with well, let me move to the next slide here. Access to energy is captured in something called the Human Development Index. I encourage you to go to United Nations Human Development Index. This is, not a secret. It's been known for a long time that energy is the first term in the equation of happiness, period. There is nothing that comes close to energy. And it doesn't matter how you measure it, whether, again, like I mentioned, with oxen and horses, or whether, it's steam turbines. It doesn't matter. Access to energy is what gives you a good life. And that's all there is to it. So, and it's an interesting curve. It's actually pretty narrow. So when we talk about climate change and conservation stuff, when we talk about the developed world up here, we have a different strategy. We talk about compact fluorescence, efficiency, electric vehicles. These people down here have nothing to conserve. They don't have the luxury of changing they just need energy. They don't have enough. So, I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. The Human Development Index goes from 0 to 1. Anything less than 0.4 is kind of hell. I mean, really, it's not very nice. Anything close to 1 is as good as it gets as far as humans go. So that's why everyone wants to come here. People, immigration is about getting out of this and getting into this. Okay, because this, you actually have the opportunity, not guaranteed, but you have the opportunity for a good life because you have the energy to do it. Now, there's lots of people. Well, yeah.
Sorry, quick question. You've got Canada on the upper right.
Right.
And being from Canada, of course, I'm interested in that. But then you have CA between France and the UK. Is that California?
Yeah, I kind of think of it as its own country.
Okay. Well,
So
it is.
I just put it there. I know. I just put it there because.
But I'm impressed that their electricity use is so much less than the national average for US.
Yeah, because it's there are parts of it that are relatively warm. It's all about weather. So Canada is big, and
Weather.
coal, and it will never come down. I mean, it'll just never come down.
But there's a lot of nuclear in Canada, particularly Ontario, a lot of hydro in Quebec.
But there's
But
not
even-
that many. But there's not that
This
many
is per
people.
person.
Right.
Yeah,
But there's not that many people, so it really doesn't affect the globe. Whereas when you get to China and India and even the U.S., we start affecting the globe because we have so many people and so much output.
So the
So-
difference between California and the United States is not related to solar and wind, it's related to weather.
Yes, related to weather. So-
Okay. Okay,
So-
thank you.
Now the interesting thing is Japan in 1990 was almost 16,000. They have come screaming down pretty much as a result of technology. And so, technology works. You can do things that's great. It's not the only thing you need to do, but it works. So if you choose the right technologies, and again, this really was based on pre-Fukushima. The energy use hasn't changed, but the environmental effects have because they tripled coal and doubled gas and things like that. So as a result of shutting down all the nuclear plants instead of just those that were subject to tsunamis, which was really a dumb thing.
I hear they're starting to resurrect them though in Japan.
Yeah, they are, and they've been trying to resurrect them. I mean, that's a whole fiasco. Again, gets into this fear of nuclear that is irrational and unsupported. So anyway, so when we talk about up here, we talk about moving them down. When we talk about here, we have to move them up, because down here, people spend about 6 hours a day getting water. I mean, can you think of that? 6 hours of your day getting water, and all you need is a little pump and some PVC piping, and you could save 6 hours a day. That's what energy does. It basically allows you not to spend your entire time doing things that take a lot of time in a brute force, and you could deal with other ways. So this is the Human Development Index. Now China's funny. I mean, most sit on this curve. Russia, Iran, and China are off this curve because of their types of government. This is the second term in the equation of happiness, is the form of government. Way more important is energy, access to energy, but the second one is government, because you're not distributing that energy equitably. Okay, not that we're wonderfully equitable. We have problems, no question about that, but it's a lot worse in these countries. So now China is a funny thing, because there are two parts to China. There are 800 million in the middle class now, and there's still 600 million in abject poverty. So if you look at China's policies, both their economic, their military, political, doesn't matter, it is to move these 600 million up into the middle class. So they're doing it. I mean, again, they're doing it. So by 2050, they will have over 1 billion middle class. Now, that's more important than you think. Okay, so in 1850, when the British started using coal in a new way, we'd used coal for centuries, just kind of burning it, warming things and stuff like that. But the Brits figured out how to coke steel, and so now suddenly you could make large amounts of steel, and that's what the London Bridge was about. That's why all the stories about it. It was the first steel bridge in the world, and their battleships were suddenly steel, and they were coal-fired battleships made of steel. Now, what do you think that did to the wooden ones in their competition? Yeah, that's why the British became the world lead, the biggest navy and most powerful navy in history in the late 1800s. That's what the British Empire, the sun never sets in the British Empire, was about. It's about coal and steel. It's all there was to it. Now, the funny thing is that it took them about 20 years to get the infrastructure in place to really go wild. So from 1850 to 1870, that's what they were doing. But by 1870, Britain had a hitherto unknown group of humans called the middle class. They'd never been a middle class. They'd been what do you call it? A merchant class, which you could have thought is kind of middle class, but there wasn't that many of them. But now there's a middle class, and you didn't have to own anyone to get 3,000 kilowatt hours a year. You just had to burn coal. So suddenly there's 10 million middle class in Britain in 1870. So your military and economic strength derive directly from the number of middle class in your society, not the percentage, the number. Okay, so there was no middle class in the world, okay, at that time. And suddenly they had 10 million, and that dwarfed that's it. Now, everyone started catching on, of course. And so, by the turn of the century, the United States discovered oil. We had lots of oil. Britain didn't have any oil at that time. They hadn't been to the North Sea yet, of course. And, they hated coal. They hated oil because they had coal and didn't have any oil. So, but we loved oil and coal. And so we started building oil-fired battleships, and they ran rings around the coal-fired ones. And in World War I, we pretty much had the best Navy, and Britain's was falling back. So, and then of course by in the 1930s we started hydro, and then natural gas, and then in the 50s and 60s we started nuclear. So by 1970, the United States had 100 million middle class. I'm sorry, 1950, 100 million middle class, and 1970, 200 million middle class. So again, we dominated the world in the most of the 20th century because of the number of middle class in our society. Now, we've treated the middle class a little badly lately, and that is bad. And because of that, our economy suffers. I mean, again, the middle class is everything. So this graph really kind of tells it all. So if we want to solve climate change and, eradicate global poverty and its evil stepchildren, war and terrorism, then you need to get all these people up here and all these people down there. And that is kind of the sweet spot. We could sustain this. This is sustainable. I mean, it's going to be tough, but we got to get everyone up there. We got to get everyone down there. And those are two different strategies. And if you don't have two different strategies, you're going to fail. And that's why we keep failing. Now, what does this mean? Well, okay, we can cut the industrialized world down to 6,000, kicking and screaming. No one likes to give up anything, but hey, okay. And this is what Japan's done mainly with technology and policy. But there's only about 1 billion people in that subgroup. Okay, there's a lot of people at 3,000. Okay, keep them there. We're going to get these people up to 3,000, and there is 5 billion of them, okay, that are not at 3,000, and then there's a whole another slew of people coming on. So that's why you talk about the at least, and this is if it's delivered equitably, which it isn't. It's going to be at least 34 trillion kilowatt hours, and probably we need 40 or maybe 45, depending on how badly we do this or how equitably we do this. So that's the goal. It's not the present 27, it's more like 40. Now, climate change. Climate change isn't new. Of course, it's gone on a lot, and it's been dramatically different over the past. So this is climate change over the last 500 million years. So this is the 1850 average that we like to think of as, Eden. Okay, probably not, but hey, it's good enough. I mean, before coal really started being used and gas really started, oil really started being used. So you can see right away, well, what should jump out at you?
We're not seeing the big jump at the extreme right yet.
Well, sort of. I mean, okay, I'm sorry. I need to back up a bit. So right, I mean,
oh yeah, that's striking at the left.
Yeah. The scale has changed. I'm sorry. So in going from right to left, this is thousands of years.
Okay.
This is hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. So in order to get 500 million on with any kind of resolution, you need to compress things. So in the past, it's been a lot warmer. We're in a cold spell, a really, really tough cold spell for the last 10 million years. So much so that we've had glaciation for the last 2.3 million years. And glaciation on Earth is kind of a rare event. Not only do you have to have the astronomical geometry correct, but you have to have land masses at the poles. If you don't have land masses at the poles, then you can't precipitate thick ice sheets. Okay, on the ocean, you can only precipitate about 14 to 20 feet of ice on top of ocean. But if you have land masses near the pole, you can get 3 miles of ice on it, and that's what happened. So we've had glaciation. It's been rather amazing. And at the right here, you can see we're coming out of it. So now again, compress. If you compress that to the scale of 500 million years back here, that's going to be a vertical line. So what we're doing, I mean, we're coming out of this so fast that it's stunning how fast we're coming out of this cold spell, and it's exacerbated by human activity. It's not all humans, but it's exacerbated by quite a bit. So that's where we are, and it's simply the rate of change. So it has nothing to do with how warm it is, because again, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's been warmer in the past, so who cares?" Or it's a lot more CO2 in the past. Who cares? Well, yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter what the absolute temperature is or the absolute CO2 concentration is. It's the rate of change. Biota don't like change, right? My cat doesn't like change. I don't like change. So if you change too fast, you die. It's called extinction. It's no big deal unless you're the one being extincted. But it happens all the time. The problem is it's happening so fast that we're going to lose a lot of species that we like, okay? We'll always have cockroaches. We'll always have rats. That's fine. We'll always have humans. We're kind of hard to kill.
Did we have cockroaches back there in the extreme left? I kind of doubt we even had them back then.
Oh, cockroaches. Oh yeah, they're old.
Even back then.
They're hundreds of millions of years old. Yeah, they're an old, very successful group, like sharks.
Yeah, but that's awfully hot.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Oh, cockroaches like heat. In fact,
Okay.
human beings have been one of the strongest spreading agents of cockroaches. They're in niches they would never have been in without humans. Did you know that? They actually were quite restricted to the tropics,
Right.
and low temperate zones. But no, we brought them into New York. We brought them into Canada. Hey, they never would have been there.
Yeah, I used to work at the Ontario Cancer Institute, and they got into the rabbit collection and spread all through the hospital. It was a chore.
Oh God, that's terrible. Well, anyway, so this is climate change, and it's all about the rate of change. Oops.
Yes, it is. That's great. It's quite an important slide.
Yeah, that's a great slide too. It's good work by this group. So here we have 2 models. I apologize for models. I hate models because I'm an empiricist. I like data. Models are great. You can make models do whatever you want, and that's fine. But there are 2 models that everyone talks about. One is called A2, which is business as usual, no reductions in fossil fuel emissions or anything else. B1, everything we think we can do. Now this is important. It's not 0. It's just everything we think we can do. And if you look on this graph, well, that's not that great. I mean, it's better. Hey, the blue is better than the red, no question about it. And anything you do is going to bring you closer to the blue. But don't think we're going back to the 1850 anytime soon, because we're not. So we kind of got to deal with this. So not just do we lower emissions, but we have to mitigate the effects of climate change because it is happening and it will happen. There's no way we are going to return to anything less than 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit change. Now this is Fahrenheit. So anyway, so that's kind of what we talk about. So again, COP is only about who's going to pay for implementing B1. All the other questions are not irrelevant, but they're lower down in category. This is it. This is what we need to do. Now, so our decisions determine our future in the sense that, if you do B1, if you do everything we think we can, well, it still gets hot, but it's not irrationally so. But hey, if we don't do anything, it gets really hot. Now, again, these are models, and you got to watch out for that. But our modeling is getting much better. And that's one thing that is improving with time is our computer capability and modeling capability. Now, this is really the important one. And the last one, I'll talk about climate change. So this is the maximum rate of reductions required to meet B1. Okay, so to do what we can. And in 2011, I remember because I started doing this before 2011. And we had to come down almost 4% a year in terms of emissions, global emissions, but we could still have some at the end. We didn't have to come to zero. Well, we blew that one. So 2015 comes around. Now we have to come down 5% a year, and we have to go to zero by 2050. Well, we blew that one. So then 2020, which I hated, it's in the past now. It was always the future. It was always the distant future, and now it's the past. So we had to come down 9% a year, which is extraordinary. And then we had to go to zero by 2040. So when you hear this, the date 2040, that's what this is talking about. That's what everyone's saying. Oh, you gotta go to zero by 2040. Well, there's no way in hell we're going to go to zero by 2040. I mean, look at this curve. This is, when everybody talks about a tipping point, well, it goes vertical. And, then what do? I mean, that's it. So in fact, every single projection that's reasonable, and I don't mean what desires, okay, because you see a lot of graphs where they start splitting off, based on your desire, okay, whether or not we get rid of coal. Well, it goes here. It's like, no, what the real projections are this: we're not going to decarbonize at all by 2050. The globe will not lower its emissions by 2050 at all, and that is depressing. It's worrisome, but that's what we're facing. So unless we have radical change in everything, politics, economics, everything else, emissions will continue to go up. And they're not going to go up much, but they're not going to come down. So on that happy note, let's move to what you were talking about before, the capacity factor. I'm sorry, the CO2 emissions of each one, and then I'll get the capacity factor. So the latest UN government panel on climate change and the latest UN Economic Commission for Europe, more importantly, these are the new numbers for emissions from these sources. Now they're an average, there's, onshore wind, there's offshore wind, there's, different types of solar PV and blah, blah, blah. But, and then there's small and large hydro, which are quite different. But this is it. So, it's all about, emissions are all about fossil fuel. Biomass is not very good, by the way. So, these are huge numbers. These are not huge numbers. So we don't have the luxury of throwing out one of these, of saying, oh, we don't need nuclear. Oh, I don't like wind. Oh, I don't like solar. We don't have that luxury because we got to replace all of these with all of these, everything you can possibly do, plus the other things like storage and efficiency and conservation, that too. But you got to get rid of these and you got to bring all of these up. Now, what's funny is that these are life cycle numbers. Okay, so it includes mining, it includes enriching for uranium, it includes mining for copper, for all that kind of stuff, and then transportation and manufacturing. Manufacturing is just one of those things. Now, the thing about fossil fuels is it's all about the fuel. So most of the costs are in fuel. And most of course, the emissions are in fuel. Most of the emissions here are in construction. Okay, a little bit in terms of hydro from methane release from the backwaters that have been dammed, but this is all about construction. Now,
Got a quick question. Could you distinguish, please? You may have done so already, but I missed it, between biomass co-firing and biomass.
Co-firing is just a combination of natural gas and biomass, or you can use coal too. But you're using two things at once, and you're using the heat from one to help with the other, and that kind of thing. So it doesn't do much, but it does something. That's fine.
And then the 230, that's a big difference. 230 to 740. Are you talking in biomass there? You're talking.
Yeah, but most of it's coal or natural gas.
What about this one with 230 over it?
Okay, this is straight biomass. So we have power plants that just burn wood pellets and stuff like that. Okay, so this is straight biomass. This is a combination of biomass and
I see.
Usually coal. But yeah, I said that's kind of confusing. But it is the category that people talk about.
Okay, thank you.
Now this other and I can send you this report if you want. Bug me, just came up with a new life cycle of every impact, not just emissions, but talk about land occupation, carcinogenic effects, consumption of minerals, and other things like that. And in contamination of fresh water and stuff like that. What am I doing? I hit something. Okay. And you can still see this, right?
Yep, clear.
I just hit a button by accident. And what's interesting is that, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but nuclear had the lowest impact in every single category, including carcinogenic, which doesn't make much sense, right? But of course, radiation doesn't cause cancer except at huge concentrations, and huge doses, and we don't ever get those. So
being a retired radiation oncologist, I can tell you we're now experimenting with low dose radiation to improve immune responses when you have COVID.
Yes, absolutely.
If we hadn't developed vaccines, we'd be using a lot more radiation today.
Well, we should have been using the radiation because we were already set up for it, right? And
right.
I'm part of a coalition that was looking at this across the country in 2020.
Yeah.
And we could have saved 80% of the lives that were lost in America by just when they were going to get admitted to the hospital, because you have to do it when the immune system actually starts going out of whack, not before or after. But so as soon as they were admitted to the hospital, it should have been rolled down to radiology, given a half a grade dose to each lung, and they would have been, discharged about 3 days later. So that's to be one of the big ethical failures of America, because we could have saved 600,000 lives without, easily, with nothing new. So that's don't get me started. So this is life cycle impacts on human, okay? And again, nuclear is the lowest. There's some low points here, but again, if you average all of PV, it's a little bit higher. But again, you see that it's all about fossil fuel. It really is fossil fuel. And so again, you bring all of these up because they all have low impacts on human health. Now, this is on ecosystems, same kind of thing. Nuclear is the lowest, absolutely the lowest. And of course, others are not. Now, big hydro gets a bad rap in this report. Not sure I agree with that perfectly, but that's okay. It's still much lower than fossil fuel. And then land life cycle, land use, of course, nuclear, because it's so energy dense, it doesn't take much land at all. It doesn't affect much land. And then here's where the solar and wind have much higher.
Could I ask a question about where oil is on this graph?
This is only for electricity production, and oil is only used in the Middle East anymore for electricity production. Although we have backup generators that take oil, especially in New England when things get really cold, and the coal isn't able to produce anything. But yeah, so it's not on here. And again, you'll notice I don't talk about petroleum much because that's all about transportation. And most of this is not. But oil, you can think of oil midway between coal and gas.
Right. Where the biomass co-firing is. Okay.
Okay, so I've set you up for this. What are the fastest growing energy sources in the world?
Natural gas.
A good choice. A good guess.
Coal also.
Good guess.
Even though it's low, going down in some areas, going up in others.
Right.
Yeah. What else? Well, we in terms of rate of growth, solar is doing extremely well, even though it's a small thing. It's very easy to go up 50 to 100% because it's so small.
Right, but it'll hit a roadblock when it goes up to 20%.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's oil. Oil is still the fastest growing energy source in the world, and then coal, and then gas. Okay. So this is bad. This is, not good. Because not just do you have to get up there, but you have to replace these, and they're growing faster than these are. Even renewables are great, and if you extrapolate that out, maybe by 2100 you'll be able to replace these, but nowhere, it's not fast enough. And also this is slowed a bit. I'm sorry, I don't have a new graph for 2023, but it's the same. But renewables have slowed a bit. You know, in places like California, they've run up against the problems when you have a lot of installed renewables and you don't have the correct backup. So anyway, this is not good. So it also points to that, wait a second, nuclear and hydro are the only ones that ever done anything against fossil fuel. So if you start saying, I don't want nuclear, I don't want hydro, I don't want solar, well, that's all you got. Okay, so you know, either give up or increase all of these. I mean, nuclear has to triple, hydro has to double, renewables have to increase by 500%. So you know, you need more of this than we're doing. We're not doing a good job, and that's why the emissions are still growing up, and we're not going to come down anytime soon.
There's this famous guy, Wade Allison from Oxford University, and he points out that when we switch from fossil fuels to most of the renewables, we lose about 4 logs of energy density, whereas when you go to nuclear, you gain about 6 logs. So it's a huge difference, and we've been going the wrong direction for quite a while in our enthusiasm. Here in Madison, it's a very green city. And you go to 350.org or Sierra Club and you offer to talk to them about nuclear, they don't want to hear.
No, they don't.
They're totally fixated on wind and solar.
Yeah, because they believe Jacobson. That's why what he's done is so horrible.
Yeah.
And there's a few like him. They've just totally thrown out the only solution we have. I mean, and if you read this report on material needs, nuclear is it. It's the only one we can do. We should be 90% nuclear with a little hydro. That's pretty much it. And then dots of solar here and there where you're not on the grid. Sure. But it'll take us 100 years to figure that out, unfortunately. Although there's nothing like rolling blackouts to get people really mad. Really, really mad. And they're kind of mad in California. Anyway, so the grid is kind of funny because electricity is produced, delivered, and consumed in a balanced way. It has to all be balanced by minute to minute, or else you start having rolling blackouts. So up in Pacific Northwest, this is a load map from Bonneville Power Administration, which is one of our balancing authorities. So the grid is balanced.
There's a question for you. I think the slides aren't advancing. We continue to see the comparison of life cycle emissions.
Thank you, Tony. I was going to say this.
Okay, then. Oh well, hold on a second. Let me new share. Can you see that?
It actually happened in my presentation too, so I know what you're going through.
Okay. Well, let me get back. Is this the one that you saw last?
No, it's all new.
Oh God, what an idiot! I'm sorry.
We were behind.
Yeah.
Hold it.
This is it. Oh,
yep,
no, one more.
We were on one post here.
I've been this one.
That one, we've been stuck on that one for quite a while.
Oh, I can't believe
I apologize. I should have moved your head.
No, I'm very glad I have a lot of time because I wasted time talking about this without having the slides. Okay.
We get the idea, so you can skip through the other ones pretty quickly.
Okay. Yeah. So again, nuclear is the lowest here. So impacts on human health, absolutely the lowest. Impacts on ecosystems, and this is the different type of things. Marine ecotoxicity, freshwater eutrophication, agricultural, acidification. Nuclear is absolutely the lowest. There's no question.
This is being recorded, so we will get this again.
Oh, good. Yep. And so the same thing. This is land use, and it just doesn't take much land. It doesn't take much of anything, because again, it's so energy dense. So oh God.
That's why I have a hard time. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, this is it. So so again, oil's the fastest growing, then coal, then gas, and then the renewables are down here, and nuclear and hydro. And again, these are so high and growing so fast because of those people I talked about, the people that have no energy that you have to give energy to. Yeah. They are getting it, and they will get it, and they should get it. But it's how do you give it to them? So again, these are not, this is screaming up there. Yep. And by 2100, it'll be a significant chunk if we get that far, and don't realize that it's a total waste of materials, but in land. But that's okay. You can't say I don't like any of these, because again, these are the only alternatives. Boy, I'm really sorry. I wasted time there. Okay, so electricity is simultaneously produced, delivered, and consumed minute by minute. If you don't, you start having rolling blackouts, or you start, doing other things like blowing transformers and stuff. So, so people are sitting at desks, minute by minute, at computer consoles, making sure this whole thing is balanced. Now, I want to show you, this is a load map of our grid up here where I am, that the Bonneville Power Association administration is our leading balancing authority. Okay, so, and this just shows this is 1 week time, and it's hour to hour here. I'm sorry, it's minute to minute. And the red is the load. So that's what we're drawing off the grid, and the others are going onto the grid. So you see hydro just mirrors that load, right? So we use hydro to balance our grid. Most other places use natural gas, okay? But we have so much hydro that we use hydro. And the brown is, thermal, which is natural gas, coal, and nuclear. So, and those don't vary much, because why would you vary them? They just chug out energy like crazy. Water, you can just, not put it through the turbines and the dam, and that's fine. And then here's wind and green. So it doesn't do anything, and then suddenly it starts screaming up, and you got to dump hydro and even dump a little bit of natural gas, and you actually dump it. There's no saving. You can't store the big dams are called run-of-the-river dams. They're not storage dams. Only Grand Coulee up here is a storage dam.
Okay.
So you use it or lose it kind of thing. And so all wind is doing in the Pacific Northwest is displacing hydro. It's not displacing fossil fuel. So the wind turbines here are totally useless. I mean, we've spent $14 billion putting turbines in the state of Washington, and it is absolutely useless for CO2.
Now, the thermal includes nuclear, oil, gas.
Right.
That nuclear is thrown in there as well because it's thermal.
Right.
Okay.
There are some load graphs that actually separate it out.
Yeah.
But generally they all run, unless they're down for refueling or something.
Right. That's a very interesting comment about spending all that money for solar in Washington. Thank you for that.
Yeah, well, wind. I mean, we don't have much solar because
wind. Yeah,
we're at 47 degrees north latitude. You shouldn't have solar here.
No.
I actually put solar panels on my roof just to get street cred on something that wasn't nuclear. So we had a ridiculous program in Washington State that, I mean, it's absurd. Our electricity is the cheapest in the country. It's 8 cents a kilowatt hour, although at that time it was 7 cents. They were paying me 54 cents a kilowatt hour. I mean, are you nuts? I mean, I'll take it. Thank you very much for paying for it, taxpayers. But that's absurd. So and then of course they discontinued that after 5 years because they ran out of money, because that's an absurd thing. But yeah, so I paid for myself overnight. But I only, my capacity factor, we'll get into that right now, was only 10%. My capacity on my solar cells is 10%. That's absurd. That's lousy. So anyway, so what is capacity factor? Okay. Capacity factor that one of you mentioned before, I'm not sure if it was Lewis or Tony. The capacity factor is the annual average percent of the maximum output possible from any unit. So if you have a 1 megawatt wind turbine, if the wind blew at 35 miles an hour, 24/7, 365 days a year, you would get 1 megawatt, continuous, right? And so you could count on that as 1 megawatt, but it doesn't. In fact, average across the United States, the wind only blows at the right speed about 35% of the time. So it's not a 1 megawatt wind turbine, it's a 0.35 megawatt wind turbine. Now, nuclear just runs all the time. You only have to refuel it every 2 years. So it just runs all the time. In fact, the nuclear power plant near me has a capacity factor of 99%. They're just really, it's the best run nuclear plant in the world as far as I'm concerned. Natural gas only runs about, less than 60% of the time. You might say, well, why not? Well, it turns out natural gas is expensive. It's not as cheap as everyone thinks. Okay. The natural gas plants run only when they make a lot of money. Okay. So they're used for peaking. So when especially in deregulated markets where they can charge 3 times the price of ordinary electricity, that's when they fire up. So natural gas is expensive. You don't want to run natural gas plants all the time, but you want to run them when you need them and when you need to back up something else. So in California, that has so much solar, when the sun starts setting, all right, there's dozens of natural gas plants that are idling all day long, waiting to fire up when the sun goes down. Now that costs a lot of money to have natural gas plants idle, but no one ever includes that cost into the cost of solar. So there's all these indirect costs that tend to change things around, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But so this is the capacity factor, and this is just an average over the United States. Now it turns out if you know the capacity factor, then you can tell how much electricity this unit's going to make over a year, over its life. So you take the installed capacity, so like a 1 megawatt, wind turbine, times 0.35, so 0.35 megawatts times 8766 hours per year, and that's the amount of power that unit will make, period. It'll make less if you have mechanical troubles, but it's not going to make more. So, excuse me, in Washington State, the average capacity factor for wind is 27%. Now, if you go to Tornado Alley, which goes from northern Texas up to North Dakota, then it's 45%. So why are you building wind turbines in Washington State? Why don't you? They should, and they are. There's a lot of wind turbines. Most wind turbines in America are actually in Tornado Alley because they produce a lot more power, because the wind is blowing a lot more. I mean, even birds don't like to migrate through Tornado Alley. That tells you something. So if you look at then comparing apples to apples is difficult because no one ever does this. No one ever corrects for capacity factor or lifespan. Sometimes they might, but you can't compare a 1,000 megawatt wind farm with a 1,000 megawatt nuclear power plant. Because when you do, and this is in Washington State, if you do, the nuclear plant produces 4 times as much energy per year as the same installed capacity for wind. So when you comparing costs, which everyone does, they only compare these two. They don't compare the actual output. So you need to build 4,000 megawatts of wind to equal 1,000 megawatts of nuclear. And it's even worse than that because the lifespan. So if you look at the wind, whose lifespan is only 25 years or so, in nuclear, which is 80 years, not 40. 40 was a regulatory number picked out of the air by the Atomic Energy Commission. It has nothing to do with the design life. Design life's about 80 years. Design life for Grand Coulee Dam is about 120 years. So if you compare the life of this, then you're going to have to build 11,000 megawatts of wind to equal 1,000 megawatts of nuclear. So when you're comparing these costs, and you're wondering, what can we afford? Nuclear is the cheapest in terms of actual output. And again, you won't find that anywhere because no one does this kind of calculation. Although the June issue of Nuclear News, I go through all this. Okay, so if you want to, tell me if I'm going too long here, but if you want to come up with a Green New Deal, I got one for you. I got a Green New Deal for you. So you're going to have something like this, not exactly like it, but something like this. First, you're going to have to stop building fossil fuel plants. Duh, come on, people. Okay, because once you build a new natural gas plant, you're locked into that plant for 40 years. That's it. When you build a new coal plant, you're locked into that for 40 years. So no one's going to shut down a 10-year-old gas plant. I mean, the investors would cry foul, and cost of electricity would go out. It's like you can't do that. So you have to stop building them. new ones, and we're not going to stop anytime soon. So that's a problem. Stop closing existing hydro and nuclear plants that have been relicensed as safe by the Federal Energy Regulation Commission or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They're all the remaining reactors in the United States in most hydro dams are in great shape. You've got to keep these going because they're our main source of clean energy. Now, complaining, that a penny kilowatt hour is just too much for America to bear is stupid. I mean, if you're going to decarbonize, it's going to cost us trillions. Because people say, oh well, the nuclear plant out here, the average cost on the open market is a penny more than natural gas. Okay, so you care about the planet? A penny a kilowatt hour is way too much to cost. That's absurd. California's energy costs have doubled in the last 10 years because of renewables, so that doesn't hold water. So that's, it's just, the perspective is not there.
I had a question on Tornado Alley. We're not in Tornado Alley here in Wisconsin, but we have just north of Madison a series of wind turbines, 6 of them put up by a very environmental woman who runs a big company here called Epic. And I've noticed that when the wind gets above 50 miles an hour, they shut down automatically. They have shut down the damage. So my question is, you give Tornado Alley some high marks for improving the capacity factor, but how often do they have to shut down? Is it anything like what we see around here? This summer, we've been getting a lot of 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Right. Yeah. And again, that's why Tornado's capacity factor is both so high and not so high, right? Because 45% is much better than 30 or 35. Yeah. But if you could take really strong winds, then it would be up to 60 or 70%.
But so that is, I guess I'm asking that number where it goes from 18 to 35 or something like that. Does that take into account the shutoff times?
Yes. Yeah.
It does. Good. Okay.
So this last point here, build as many wind turbines as possible, but site them in a Tornado Alley. So if you look here, good question. So here's Wisconsin, but here's Tornado Alley. And, you should not be building wind turbines in Georgia. Just stop it. Don't do that. That's dumb. Scientifically, that is dumb. Yeah, the same thing. Maine, I mean, even Washington State, there's a couple of places here, actually near me, where they're okay, but it's just not very good. So why would you waste the steel and the copper and the every other issue that you have to build them there? We have high voltage transmission lines. We need to put more in because if you have renewables, you need high voltage transmission lines. And so that can take the energy almost anywhere it needs. So this is where you build wind. Same thing with solar. Rooftop solar is good in the sense that if you put it on new buildings and you amortize it along with the mortgage, you won't even feel it. I mean, you'll maybe increase your mortgage $20 a month or something. So you want to put it on new buildings, but existing buildings are a little bit more expensive to put them in. And then you put them in areas like this. Okay. Again, you don't build solar in Maine. Okay, you should not do that. You should build it here. So when you're talking about Tornado Alley for wind, Southwest for solar, and everywhere where hydro is possible, and all the other places nuclear. I mean, this is the best geographic distribution of energy sources you should have. And it's kind of funny because most nuclear plants are in the east.
Jim, can I just say I really like your maps for those things. Those are huge.
Yeah.
But it's all going to mean transmission lines. And we're hearing a lot of stuff lately. When you go across state lines, try to go any distance, transmission is just slowing everything way down.
Right.
I don't know what you have to say about that.
Yes, and no one wants transmission lines. Oh my God, I don't want transmission lines in my backyard. but I want solar and wind. Sorry, you're not going to get them if you don't have high voltage transmission line. So that's what the last big line we built was between Texas and Tennessee, and that was in 2005. So we're not building these. We need to build them. We're overtaxing them, which causes fires and things like that. So it's like, we're not doing the right things. And it turns out DC lines are better than AC lines, which I didn't know. So the longer the transmission line, the more efficient it is if it's DC, and the lower the cost, the less line loss you have. So yeah, we need to start building huge DC lines across America. That's just all the way you're going to do it. Of course, that's increased the amount of steel that renewables need. They're not.
And copper.
And copper. Yep. So it's kind of all bound up together in the same issue. Now I'm going to go fast for a couple of things because I want to get to, but I will get to this. Here we go. So there's the same kind of thing for dams. So of the 80,000 dams in America, only 3% are powered. All right. So a lot of those are small, but there's a fair number that are big enough that you could double hydro in America without building a single new dam. Now that's nice. That is the lowest hanging fruit I know of. So, if you already have a dam there, and it's usually made for either transportation or irrigation or flood control, that kind of thing, but the people living near it are already used to a dam being there. So if you just, electrify it, which would be much easier in an existing dam, you would have much less public outcry. You'd have much less regulatory issues because the EIS is pretty much already done. So we could do this. This is a nice thing to do. I'm going to escape and go back up to here where I started talking about nuclear. Okay, can you see all this? Can you see this? Or have I?
Looks like you got to go back to share right now. We're just seeing all the images of the people.
Oh, good. Okay. Oops. Damn, what am I doing? I'm hitting wrong buttons here, Jim. Great scientist. Can you see that now?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we can see something.
All right.
Okay, yeah, you're kind of back where you were.
I apologize. So new small modular reactors. Now they are as good or better than natural gas and hydro at load following or buffering the intermittency. You can turn the small modular reactors pretty much on and off like a light switch, like natural gas. The big ones, hard to ramp them up and down significantly, and it kind of costs fuel and things like that. So now there, all the SMR designs really cannot melt down. Now, engineers will say never use the word never, but they really can't. So sorry, we've made this. I mean, even the big ones we have, the old ones, don't really melt down. I mean, Chernobyl's one thing. In Fukushima, we told them their seawall was crap, for years before that happened. But really, meltdown is not a big deal. But SMRs are so overly protective that they just cannot melt down. And we know what to do with the waste. Waste is a piece of cake. Get me back to talk about nuclear waste. We know where to put it. We know exactly what to do, exactly how much it's going to cost. We're just not allowed to do it. And it's not Yucca Mountain. So we haven't been idle in the last 30 years. And there are plans in the United States by 2035 to put in at least 3 new modular reactors. So Bill Gates has a company, you probably know that, right? TerraPower, Bill Gates's nuclear company. They have a fast reactor, and they're probably going to put the first one in Wyoming at a coal plant to replace the coal. X Energy is one of these pebble bed reactors, which I'll talk about, and then NuScale's SMR is simply a shrunk down version of a big nuke. That's the easiest one, and it's the one that NRC knows how to regulate and how to license. So here's Bill Gates's reactor. In all of these new reactors, most of the cores are underground. So this is the ground, I'm sorry, this is the ground level here. And so the reactor core is underground, which is great because you have a huge heat sink in the surrounding geologic material. So that's, and it's also safer if something does happen. But so this is, this is a fast reactor concept. Now, X Energy is a pebble bed reactor. In the pebble bed, instead of having fuel rods, the uranium, and it's more highly enriched, is in the center of this pebble that's surrounded by very high temperature refractory materials that cannot melt down. And the nice thing about this is that your spent fuel is a little pebble. I mean, it's about the size of a golf ball. Much easier to handle than a 15-foot, 2-ton fuels assembly. So, this is, this is actually very nice. I like this, and we're probably going to get one right here where I am on the property of the existing nuclear power plant. We were supposed to get the first one. We'll probably get the second because Dow Chemical has approached X Energy to build the first one in Louisiana and along the Gulf Coast to power their chemical manufacturing plants, which is interesting. And Dow Chemical, being rich, can just, they don't need loans. They're just going to fork over the $3 billion to build this. So that'll probably happen about 2030. And then there's NuScale, which should go in 2028, 29 in Utah to buffer, this is funny, to buffer a wind farm. It's like, well, you don't need the wind farm if you get the nuclear plant, but that's okay. That'll become obvious. When you start building these small modular reactors, you'll start realizing, well, I don't need them to back up a wind farm. I just need them. So after about 20 or 30 years of that, we'll stop building wind turbines and that'll be fine. Just to give you an idea about NuScale's, the fact that it can't melt down, when you shrink the size of the core from a big one to a small one, the surface area to volume ratio changes dramatically, and you can bleed off heat much faster. And so you can just passively, if something happens, you don't need power, you don't need pumps, don't need external water, because fuel is only hot for about 2 weeks is when you have to worry about a meltdown. After 2 weeks, it's not hot enough to melt down anymore. So all you have to do is just let it contain, the existing water will cool it. And then as that evaporates, it'll continue to cool it, and then it's just indefinite air cool. Now, it turns out this particular design, NuScale's design, can actually be run without water at all. It can be air cooled. So in deserts and areas like that, where you don't have a lot of water, this can be run air cooled. Now that sacrifices about 5% of the power, but that's worth it in terms of not needing to use water. Now there's other reactors. I don't know if you know about the CANDU reactors. They're pressurized water reactor, and they were designed by Canada and built around the world, especially in India. But Canada has a bunch of CANDU reactors. And the thing about CANDU reactors is you refuel while it's running. You don't have to shut the reactor down, but the fuel is not very efficient. If you make thorium fuel, which is 80% thorium, 20% uranium, highly enriched uranium, highly enriched uranium, it gives you about 10 times the power, and you don't have to refuel it every day. So this is really a nice design for CANDU reactors, and it uses thorium. And Canada also has a terrestrial energy molten salt reactor that uses thorium and uranium. You need uranium to kickstart it, and I'll talk about that. But there's several very nice designs for new reactors, and they are going to be built, and they probably will become normal in 10 or 20 years. I probably realized, let's see, what time is it? I probably realized I should go over fission. Is that okay? Do you want to hear this? Okay, well, Uranium-235 splits easily, 238 does not. So if you're, when you split uranium-235 with a neutron, you get 3 neutrons out and some energy. I mean, it's such a deal. That's why this works. That's why you can have controlled and uncontrolled chain reactions, is because you produce more neutrons than enters. Now, if you're a bomb, and you're all uranium-235, which you have to be in order to be a bomb, or all plutonium-239, it's the same thing, then those 3 neutrons generally see another 235, and then they split, and you produce 3 more. So 9, 27, 81, boom. In a microsecond, you're at 10 to the 20 neutrons and 10 to the 20 splits. And that's your power. And the power of a bomb does not come from the radiation. It comes from the speed with which these 2 pieces are flying apart and the pressure. And it's a kinetic energy issue, a nuclear bomb. It's not radiation at all. Now, if you're a fuel for a reactor, you're only 5% enriched or so. And so those 3 neutrons that come from the split, the original split, generally don't see another 235. They see a 238. And that does not split. It captures that neutron and quickly double beta decays to form plutonium-239. Now, plutonium-239 burns even better, splits even better than uranium-235. So after 2 years, you're producing more energy from the plutonium you bred, or breeding. So you're breeding plutonium from uranium-238. But that's producing more power than the original 235 in your fuel. Now, after 6 years, all these fission products build up to the point you start scarfing up all the neutrons and the thing fizzles out. It's not used up, it's not spent, it's just got too much junk in it. So you've only used about 5% of the energy in the fuel. So you can recycle that like the French do and get more energy out of it. Or you can set it aside and wait for the fast reactors, which will burn all this stuff, and you can get 10 times the energy out of the fuel. Now, thorium's a little different. So thorium itself doesn't split, thorium-232. So what happens, I should back up a little bit. Things that fission have an odd number of mass. So uranium-235, plutonium-239, uranium-233, anything with an odd number mass splits easily or more easily. If you're an even number mass, like uranium-238, you don't split easily, or plutonium-240 or thorium-232. So what you need to do is it goes through the same kind of capture. It doesn't split, it captures a neutron and then turns to thorium-233 and then double beta decays back to something that does split, uranium-233. So you're breeding 233 from thorium-232, and then this gets you into the cycle. So the uranium splits, it gives off two neutrons, which then thorium captures and then breeds into 233, and that's what's producing your power. So it's a little bit different. So thorium is your breeding material, and uranium-233, not 235, is what's splitting. Okay, so if you talk to the leading climate scientists like Jim Hansen, who I know well, they all say we're not going to do any of this without nuclear. Now, some of the younger ones don't get it. That's okay. They don't learn very well. But all the leading climate scientists say you cannot do this. You cannot decarbonize without a huge amount of nuclear expansion. So if you don't care about what Jim Hansen says, then you don't care about anything. So again, build new small modular reactors as fast as possible, and follow the National Hydropower Association and Department of Energy to double hydro within the next few decades, like I said here. So some variation of that. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can increase one, decrease the other, but this is what you got. Then you need to secure sources of the metals we need and the materials we need. You need to go to fully electric vehicles. Yeah, hydrogen's okay. It'll take us 20, 30 years to get the infrastructure in place to use that. It's good, okay, but we know electric vehicles. Not sure if we have enough lithium for them, but we got them. And then we need to streamline the whole process of any of this. It takes too long to put in a high voltage transmission line. It takes too long to license a nuclear reactor. This is absurd. We don't have the time. And then we need storage. And again, batteries won't do it. What about storage? Yeah, grid scale storage batteries is not going to happen anytime soon. Okay, we have a few little things that are working, but right now, batteries could provide maybe an hour of backup, for the grid. I mean, that's just absurd. The best way, of course, is using gravitational potential energy, like we do with pumped hydro. Does everyone know what pumped hydro storage is? Well, we'll get to that. So you basically lift something up like water. This is a pumped hydro. You have two reservoirs, an upper reservoir, lower reservoir. The lower reservoir can just be a river or lake or something. So you when you have wind or solar energy, you use that to pump water up to the upper reservoir. And when you need it, you let it out and it drives a little hydroelectric generator, which is great. 97% of the energy storage in the world is pumped hydro. So people talk about batteries, but no, it's all pumped hydro. And that's fine. So here's one that's been working in Germany since 1958. It's on the Elbe River. And right now it's backing up 132 megawatts of wind. And it just, this is 1938. It doesn't take much to keep these running. Sometimes you have to replace, the generator, fine. But this is pretty good. And there are some storage systems now that don't use water, that lift 35-ton bricks up 300 feet and let them out to generate electricity. So and there are some this is funny. You fill train cars with rock and you use renewable energy to run it up a hill. And then when you need it, you run it back down the hill. It's very, very, very interesting. Okay, so all we have to do is go from this to this. Okay, we got to go from this. This is our present mix to this. All right. So it's going to be hard, but you have to do that. I mean, that's if you want to decarbonize. And of course, that's going to take us about 1 billion tons of steel. What's the annual output of steel in the United States? About 150 million. So we got to either import a lot more steel or make more steel iron mines, which isn't going to go over well with the public either. So again, it's tough. There's always these trade-offs. So let's get to the mix. So this is a mix. Who knows? I mean, you can vary this as much as you want. I did this as much to be political and be politically correct as well as scientifically. So 500,000 new megawatts of wind, 200,000 new megawatts of nuclear, which will produce almost the same amount of power, 300,000 megawatts of new solar, and 120,000 megawatts of new hydro, keeping the existing fleet running. Now, this is going to cost $9 trillion, of which $4 trillion is capital. Now, it turns out business as usual is $9 trillion, but the capital for that is only about $1 trillion. So the whole thing about renewables and nuclear is that you have greater upfront costs. You have greater infrastructure costs because you're building stuff. And fossil fuel is all about the fuel. You're just paying for fuel. So this is the same amount of money, but there's more of it is upfront capital investment. And that's the trick, because you have to convince America to fork over this first for all the savings they're going to get later. Now, every time you hear that, you cringe, because sometimes it doesn't come later. But again, this is what it's going to cost. That's, it's not that much, except more of it is in capital than fuel. Now, for the world, numbers are higher, but the same kind of thing. 65 trillion, of which 28 trillion is capital. So again, the same cost. It's about 65 trillion for business as usual, but it's only about 7 trillion in capital costs. So again, the idea of who's going to pay for this, who's going to pay for the capital investment, is what the question is. Who's going to pay that extra $14 trillion between now and 2050? So Wisconsin, excuse me, my number's wrong here, but that's okay. It doesn't really change much. So this is your mix. I'm sorry, this is a little less, 2022. And this is the mix you need to get to. And yeah, you need to, increase renewables 5 times. You only need to triple nuclear and increase hydro 3 or 4 times. So right now, see, last year you generated 69 trillion watt hours, and you don't have much grid scale storage, and you don't have much EVs. But by 2040, you're going to increase that dramatically to 110 terawatt hours, all projections for use, with 50. And you're going to have, if you have this mix, you're going to have about 15 or so grid scale storages, whether that's pumped hydro or other, that are generating enough power essentially to back up or to make the renewables useful, and also to power the 5 million EVs you're going to need about that time, which is going to take over 4 trillion watt hours on its own. Now, again, you can adjust this however you want, right? But the more renewables you bring on, the more costly it's going to be, and the more infrastructure you're going to take.
Jim, I just saw Richard try to say something, and I think, Richard, you've got your muted right now.
Somehow or other I got muted. Yeah, I have a question. Are we on nearly the last slide?
Close, yeah.
Okay, I really appreciate your focusing on electricity. I think it's the first of the low hanging fruit, but the other one very close to it is transportation.
Right.
And that leads me to ask you to talk a little bit about where you think the transportation from nuclear could be most impactful. Are you thinking about shipping mostly? Of course, in Wisconsin, but in Wisconsin, we also have railways to bring all the coal here. Now, hopefully, the coal will be stopped long before we use nuclear in trains. But
we don't want nuclear trains. Okay, nuclear big ships is okay, but no, you want nuclear to generate the electricity for electric trains.
For electric trains, okay. Well, like they did in France.
Right.
What about shipping? What about our shipping international?
Well, you can, if we get the hydrogen worked out, that would be the transportation fuel of choice.
For shipping?
For shipping and for large trucks and for airplanes.
I can understand large trucks, but why not shipping? Thorcon is using floating reactors in Indonesia.
No. Shipping, what I've seen on cost analysis is that when you get to that point, it's very costly compared to hydrogen or anything else. So because it's a small application. Now, our nuclear navy is great, but they don't have to make money. So where shipping has to make money. So that's my thinking of that.
I have a little question to ask you inserted into that. The only example I know of a country that has a lot of energy is Iceland. They have a lot of geothermal energy. And when I was in Iceland 20 years ago or so, they said they've got so much energy, they've been making aluminum, and they want to put hydrogen power for their fishing fleet. To the best of my knowledge, that was not successful. Do you know why?
No, I don't. That's a good question.
My guess is they had some financial hard times. Right. But wouldn't that be a smart idea to hydrogenize their fishing fleet?
Oh yeah. That's my thinking is that small vehicles, cars and trucks, pickup trucks and stuff like that, can be electric. Larger things, whether it's ships or trains or big trucks, will be hydrogen, and so that can eliminate petroleum.
And you think that's less costly than nuclear, and maybe safer?
Yeah, I mean, no, nuclear is safe. It's safer. Yeah, I mean, you want nuclear to produce electricity. That's what it's best for, not to power a ship. Okay. And so, yeah, so now there are big long haul trucks that are electric now, which is buses, there's electric buses and things like that. But in general, if you're going a long distance, or you're not in the middle of the ocean, or you're in the mountain passes and stuff like that, you don't want electric. You want liquid fuel, which would be hydrogen.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see.
What else do we have?
Now this mix here, or something like it, is going to cost about $500 million.
500 billion.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, I'm sorry, 500 billion. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had to move my thing here. Of which about half of it is capital. Now, again, that's not that much for Wisconsin over this time period. And you're going to spend almost that much if you do business as usual. So not just do you have to buy fuel for fossil fuel plants, but you have to replace them every once in a while. And most of our stuff is old.
And even in Wisconsin, you think that it's realistic to increase fivefold our renewables?
I'm being optimistic. I wouldn't. Again, when I come up with these numbers, I actually have to include political correctness, because that is as important. It's not, if you say, this should be 95% nuclear and 5% hydro. How would that fly?
Well, our only hydro is from the Wisconsin River, which does not have a great height. The closest one to the south here is putting out 32 megawatts. It's 100 years old, more plus, but I can't visualize it going up fourfold for hydro.
Well, okay, you know better than me. Whoops.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So again, I apologize. I'm not. In Washington State, I can talk ad nauseum about detail.
Yeah, you've got lots of hydro out there.
Yeah. In fact, let's going back to that slide. Come on. Yeah, so the DOE says.
Yeah, there's some along the Mississippi.
Yeah. And so that's where the power would be.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, how you'd work that out between Minnesota and Iowa that's your problem.
Okay.
All right. Well, we can end there. We can talk about costs.
You can tell us a little bit about biofuels. I'm a little pessimistic about biofuels because it's still emitting CO2.
Right.
When you burn it.
And I'm also skeptical. I don't think they're a great thing. I think ethanol is kind of worthless. The other thing too is that it depends on what crop you're using and what time scale. So if you say, well, I'm going to cut down all these forests for wood chips for a biomass plant in Montana, like they do, and I'm going to plant new trees. Well, that sounds great, but when are the new trees going to be big enough to have absorbed enough CO2 to make up for what you cut down?
40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. And it's like, well, that's not what you want. Whereas if you use like switchgrass, which grows every year, well, okay, you can get into a cycle where your net production of CO2 is almost zero, although it's never zero. But so it really depends on how you set up the environment. And oil from algae just never worked. We tried a lot. But
what about well, they're talking a lot about kelp now.
Yeah, and that sounds great too, but boy, I tell you, we'll decimate the kelp beds. And okay, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, really, everyone knows there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
Now this is interesting, and again, you got to pull me off the stage here. I'll keep talking. Energy has never been cheaper than it is today. In the history of humanity, it's never been cheaper. And this is an interesting calculation before 1850. But yeah, I mean, it was always, muscle and fuel with food and all that kind of thing. Now, at the same time, food has never been cheaper than it is now, because food is always tied to energy. And so, so if you're going to make radical changes, now is actually the time to make it, because it's not going to stay cheap. And especially as we start to decarbonize, it'll just increase. Now, this is the LCOE, levelized cost. I don't like levelized cost because it has a bunch of junk in it that is not, that's fabricated, depreciation times and stuff like that. What does that have to do with the technology? No, it has to do with the financing and how we finance this stuff, and we don't finance them well. So that's a whole another discussion. But in terms of what state legislatures see, they see this kind of thing. Now, this was put together for the Northwest because each cost is slightly different geographically. So this was put together for our state legislature. So of course they're going to pick gas, right? But then gas is out, so they're going to pick wind. But it's like, wait a second, these numbers are all within a penny of the average. And again, you're saying that a penny a kilowatt hour is too much to save the world. Like, no, sorry, the cost is not what you should be doing, making your decisions on, because if it were cost, we'd just be a natural gas nation. Sure, great. But we seem to want to care about other things besides just cost. So these four, and even these three, are all about the same cost. So stop bitching, about nuclear being so expensive. It's not. It's a little bit more expensive, but not that much. And new coal is now the most expensive.
And that doesn't take into account the durability.
Right, and it doesn't take into account all the indirect costs, like having gas plants idling all day for solar in California.
Right.
And it doesn't include putting in more, let me go. It doesn't include putting in more high voltage transmission line for which are expensive, which increase renewable cost at least 25%. So here is the material needs. Okay, so this is millions of metric tons in steel and in concrete to produce the same amount of energy, 656,000 megawatt hours. So if you're going to build one nuclear plant, which is 656 million kilowatt hours, or you're going to produce, 2 hydro plants or 3 coal plants or 11,000 wind farms, wind turbines, then this is the amount of steel you're going to need. So wind is ridiculous. I mean, it takes so much steel and concrete to make wind. And that's, just not usually factored in. So if you think you're going to be making millions of these, think again, where are you going to get the steel? We don't have that much steel. So, and then, solar, a little bit better, about half that. Hydro takes a lot of concrete, but not much steel. Coal's intermediate. And then, gas and nuclear. So nuclear just doesn't take much of anything because it runs so long and it produces so much electricity. So, the materials are a big deal. So, and then the LCOE doesn't capture the indirect costs. So IHS Markit did a study that captured that, and they said 4.5 cents for existing nuclear, 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour for new gas, 6.9 for new nuclear, 8.9 for wind, and 9.8 for solar. So wind and solar are not cheaper if you include all of the indirect costs and everything else associated with it. And then there's the other weird things. We don't know how to gauge or value land, okay? But it takes a lot of land. Each of these little blue squares is number of square miles to produce 1 billion kilowatt hours a year. And then the emissions are, each little box is 4 grams per kilowatt hour produced. So again, fossil fuels all about the fuel. Renewables are all about the land, and nuclear is not about anything. Now, I coined the term death print in Forbes 10 years ago, which is kind of funny. Let's look at the death print. Okay, well, coal, so much, you got to push it off to the side because it covers everything else. And yeah, so fossil fuel kills people. Now, this is global. Hydro ends up killing people because occasionally dams break, like the Bankyo dam failure in China in the 70s. It killed 170,000 people and all that kind of thing. We generally don't. Okay, we don't kill anyone with anything, actually. It's kind of funny because we have regulatory agencies. So if you look at the numbers of these, this is the mortality rate, deaths per trillion kilowatt hours produced. Coal, is the worst. There's no question about it. And it's upper respiratory effects and things like that. Now, China used to be 250,000. Now they're coming down. They're cleaning up their act slowly. United States, we only kill 10,000 people a year. That's supposed to get a laugh. Yeah, because that's not good. Oil, not good. Fireman. Now, down here, it only gets, these are just accidents. All right. There's no health effect from these. It's just accidents. So, but here's nuclear. I mean, even with Chernobyl, it's almost 100 times, 10 times less than solar and wind, because these people fall off, ladders and fall off roofs and fall off maintaining wind turbines, and that's foolish, but hey, it happens. Now, in 3 categories: coal, hydro, and nuclear, I have global average and the U.S. average. And why is the U.S. average so much lower? Regulation. Okay, so the reason coal is so good is because of the Clean Air Act. That's why we cleaned up this. Okay, that's the only reason we kill fewer people, is because the Clean Air Act. Hydro, because we have FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They actually inspect dams, and they will shut you down if they find a problem, as they did up here a few years ago. Priest Rapids Dam, huge dam, had a little crack. They said, nope, you're going to shut this down until you fix it. So, and then nuclear, of course, NRC. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it's the strongest regulatory agency in the world in history, even though the antis think it's in the pocket of industry. It's like industry wishes it was in the pocket of industry, because they will shut you down for trivial stuff. So this is Beijing today. It's still 80% coal. They put up, they realize that you get really depressed if you don't see the sky for long periods of time. So they start putting up large screen, and this is funny, but not my choice to deal with this. But hey, they got the technology, might as well use it. I know, is that funny? Okay, so I'm really going on. Oh my God, it's almost 10. So I just wanted to end with this. What's the most dangerous thing on this list? Shout it out.
Whole industry.
I've set you up for that, but no, it's bad.
Smoking tobacco.
Yeah, smoking without question. Okay. Iatrogenic. Oh, that's weird. Well, that's medicine gone wrong. It's not malpractice. It's not abuse of drugs. It's simply we don't know why the patient died. And since we're all getting older, every time I go to the hospital, I know this number, and it frightens me. Alcohol has always been a big one. Auto is always a big. Opioid has now risen. That's horrible. Accidental falls, of course, most of us have to worry about this now because it's mainly over 65. Coal use is bad. Murder is bad. Why are we still killing people with hamburgers? I'm not sure, but that's a lot of people. And then you get down here, and it's one. Some at Brown's Ferry, someone fell off scaffolding and broke his neck. Okay, geez. Now, a biostatistician gave me grief recently because I hadn't normalized to the subpopulation. Smoking still is the worst. Now, alcohol comes above iatrogenic, accidental falls. Police see these. There's not many people died, but there's not many people in the industry, and so the risk becomes higher. Okay, so and again, it's nice to know that eating is only slightly more dangerous than nuclear power.
I have a question. Where's guns on the list?
Well, that would be in murder.
Murders. That's
what it would be in murder. Okay.
Yeah.
And so
that includes suicide.
Yes, that includes suicide.
Okay.
Which, of course, I think it's like half of the homicides in America are actually suicide. So something, I don't know the exact number, but it's stunning. So that's that. Now, even non-lethal accidents like falling off a ladder and breaking your arm, it's safer to work in the nuclear power plant than to sit at a desk trading stocks. Now, this is OSHA data. This is real. And it's not that, insurance is, inherently more dangerous than nuclear power. It's just that in nuclear power, you always worried about safety. In fact, it is the strictest OSHA environment in history. I mean, you have to have ladder training to use a ladder. I've had ladder training. It's very interesting. I didn't know that much about ladders before. But you have to have 2 qualified operators to operate a ladder. No one ever falls off a ladder at a nuclear facility. Okay. But that someone, the eighth floor of the AIG building in New York, someone's standing on a rolling chair hanging a picture. I mean, you know that. And so they fall and they break their arm and it gets reported to OSHA, and that's what it is. Now, US manufacturing, this is inherently dangerous. I mean, pouring 500-ton molten ingots of steel is kind of dangerous. So, this is a real effect. But yeah, you can't get any safer than nuclear power. So why is everyone so afraid of energy? No, because we told them to be. Sorry, my bad. But yeah, we've been scaring them for 70 years. So incorrect but intentional association with nuclear weapons. It was intentional, and it worked. I mean, it kind of worked, but we kind of lost the difference between power and weapons. Inaccurate, purposefully simplistic modeling of the low-level radiation health effects called linear no-threshold dose hypothesis. You know that. It was a stupid, very immoral, unethical thing that a handful of scientists did in the 40s and 50s, led by Hermann Mueller. And then the misunderstanding of the nature and the amount of nuclear waste. I mean, there's just not much of it. All the nuclear waste in the world would fit in one landfill, but not coal waste. And we know what to do with it. It's not difficult at all.
And you're going to talk to us a bit more about that in the fall.
Yes.
That'll be good.
I'll talk about this. WIP. We've been disposing of nuclear waste deep underground in the salts, the Permian salts, in which it takes water 1 billion years to move an inch. That's where you want to put something you want away forever and ever. Thank you. I have gone on way long. But
You were right on time. We were right on time. We've had a good discussion throughout. I want to thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful presentation. I see other people here clapping too. It's really been nice. And you put a lot of time and effort into this. We don't see these slides every day.
No, you don't.
These are new, current, most of them, and fascinating. Yep. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. That is wonderful. I really appreciate. Good crowd. Good crowd.
Yeah.
Well,
outstanding presentation.
That comes from a professor of physics.
Oh, excellent. Good.
Yeah, this has to rank as one of the best of the spring, I think. It was just great, Jim. Thank you.
Good. All right, well, get me back, to talk about waste.
Well,
that's even more fun. Nuclear waste is fun. It really is.
It is. It is a good subject. We're going to hear about dams next week from Dottie Boatman. So that'll be a slightly different take on it. She's going to cover all the dams, but it'll add to your remarks. And
good.
Appreciate that. So thank you again. It's really been fun. And
wonderful.
Can I say something?
Yes, Dottie.
I never thought death statistics would be so funny. I was muted, but I was laughing through all the charts. No, it was really hilarious.
That's good. I have found that if you're going to talk about nuclear or anything, that the public loves to talk about death. They love to talk about death. Yeah. And so, and it kind of wakes them up. And, if you can put a few jokes in there, it's a sobering numbers. But, if you don't have any humor in it, then it gets very bummer.
Yeah. That's great.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, we're looking forward to milder weather pretty soon. We got a bit of a shock with this wind and ice storm, but it's really got us going. So thank you again, and you can feel free to join us in if you want to next week or any other time. But I know it's getting up a little early for you, 8 o'clock. Appreciate that.
I need it. All right.
Appreciate that a lot. Okay. Bye all. You have a good week. Bye.